I would love to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Dr. Tracy Fritz, and we're going to be speaking about harnessing the power of detoxification in ASD, or autism spectrum disorder. Delighted to have you here today, Dr. Fritz. Before we get started, can you give us a little bit of background of why you're so passionate about what you do?
Sure, Kristen, and it's a pleasure and a privilege for me to be talking with you today about autism, which I am very passionate about. And really, my journey in the autism world started in 2009 when my daughter Louisa was diagnosed with autism. And I'm an MD, very classically trained. Her dad's an MD too. We're both family medicine physicians, and I followed all the regular guidelines for immunization with Louisa. And unfortunately, at 15 months, she had a very severe reaction to her MMR varicella vaccine and 2 other vaccines along with it. And the week following had an episode of encephalitis, brain swelling, and she had a fever to 103.9, vomiting, diarrhea. Wow. She was non-responsive. Her pupils were dilated. She was just very, very, very sick. And it took her about a week or two to come out of that illness, which, of course, was not related to the vaccines at that time. That didn't occur to her pediatrician or to me, to be honest with you. But unfortunately, on the heels of that, she had a massive developmental regression. At that point, prior to that, she was talking and just a completely normal development in every way. And so when she resurfaced after that episode about 2 to 3 weeks later, she had lost her eye contact, her ability to speak. She didn't sleep anymore. She just was, severely neurologically affected. And so that transpired over several months, and by the time we were getting answers and evaluations and a diagnosis for her, we got the diagnosis of autism. But that was in April of 2009, and then the next month, in May of 2009, I attended my first conference, which was hosted by the Autism Research Institute, so Dr. Bernie Rimland and all of the doctors involved in that, and it was eye-opening. I knew that something had happened to my daughter, that she had been developing fine. Something happened, and then everything changed, but I didn't understand what had happened. And sitting there, the very first lecture I heard was from Dr. Nancy O'Hara, who everybody in the autism world knows her. She's my mentor, and I've learned so much from her and all the other docs in MAPS. But I listened to my first lecture, and I was there to learn as a physician, but I was there as a mom to try to help my daughter. And it was just a whole new world. And I knew during that first lecture that I was in the right place and I was hearing the right things and learning the right science. And so that started my journey. And sure enough, as we started to do biomedical treatment with Louisa, she started to improve and has steadily improved since then, although we've had a lot of challenges, which I may get into later. But as soon as I started to see the changes in Louisa, the way I practiced medicine changed. I couldn't look at these chronic problems that not only my pediatric patients but my adult patients were having through the same lens anymore, now that I kind of had my blinders off. So through a series of events in a couple of years, I ended up leaving my primary care practice and opening up Little Flower Center for Integrative Medicine, where I focused on treating pediatrics, children with autism and related disorders. and that's what I've been doing, and that's how I got here.
Wow. So it's definitely a personal journey. So you're out there, learning for your own child and, now bringing the knowledge back to the rest of us. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And it is. We're all in it together. And it's amazing what we can accomplish, when we work together and focus on what our children really need for healing, because it's such an alliance. I love the, Autism Hope Alliance. It's an alliance between all of us and sharing knowledge. And parents often are the first ones who understand what is helping their child. And I think as a physician doing this work, being open to learning from families has really been so important for the things that I've learned that have helped my other patients and at times my own child.
And so, for my own history is my son has autism, and that's why that I got into this arena. I don't think we picked this arena. I think it gets picked for us.
Yes, I would agree.
And so let's jump into what we're talking about today, which is huge for our children, and and that is harnessing the power of detoxification, because our kids definitely are struggling with that. But for those that are maybe new listening and they really are kind of confused on detoxification. My child has autism. When are we talking about detoxification? So can we maybe explore a little bit about what is that?
Absolutely. Well, and so I like to talk about things in terms that I think we all can understand. And when I think about detoxification in the body, I think of it as like taking out the trash, right? Because our body does a lot of things during the day. We have metabolism. We eat our food, we get our energy so we can do all of our activities, and then we have to eliminate our waste. But part of and our body's designed to do that, but part of what happens in the body is very complicated, but it's automatic. So we don't often think about detoxification. I'm cleaning out my cells from all the things they did today, or I'm cleaning out my kidneys or my liver. But that is what your body is doing automatically. But we understand that individuals with autism have impaired detoxification. Their bodies aren't as good at cleaning out the garbage, if you will, on a daily basis. Now, there's a lot of things that contribute to the impaired detoxification that we see in children with autism. And part of it is the huge toxic exposure that we all get in our environment, which we can talk about more. But part of it sometimes is genetic, and part of it sometimes is just the illness of autism itself impairs the body's ability to detoxify. So when you take all of those things and combine them together, an individual with autism may be really having a difficult time detoxifying, cleaning the garbage out of their body. And as the days go by and we continue to have exposure to toxins in the environment, that can make a person ill. And it makes it hard to get in a good state for the body to actually heal. Because, and I think of it, I think the analogy of taking out the garbage works well, because it's like if you are working in the kitchen and you want to cook a meal, but you have, all the garbage from the meal you prepared earlier, you're not going to be able to do a good job, right, getting the meal together. You have to clean the kitchen first. And so our kids can be in a state where they've accumulated toxins and they can't clear them, and we need to get in there and help them clean up, if you will, and so that they can continue with healing.
That's a great way to summarize it. And, so when we're talking about detoxification, how does it work?
Well, our body really does come equipped. It has a system, a detoxification system, to deal with toxins that we make just from living. Like one of the byproducts of our own body's metabolism is ammonia. And our kidneys are designed to put that ammonia into a non-toxic state, and then we, excrete it in our urine. And people who have problems with their kidneys can get high levels of ammonia, and that can be life-threatening, right? So we have to deal with the toxins that our own body makes, and our liver and kidney and rest of our systems in our bodies, I'll get into, do that. But then we also can get environmental toxic exposure. So our body has to do both of those things. And the way that it works is it really starts at a cellular level, the smallest part of our body, where we take in our nutrients, and kind of like shopping for your food you're going to make your meal with. And then our cells do their job. Let's say we make our meal, and then we have leftover cell garbage, and that gets emptied into the bloodstream and goes to the liver. That's kind of like the garbage bag, right, to get it all packaged up to go out to the curb so the garbage truck can take it away. It goes through the liver into the bloodstream, and then it will get exited through the body. And there's a variety of ways that the body gets rid of toxins. Through the stool, of course, through the urine, via the kidneys, but also we sweat out toxins through our skin. We breathe them out through the vapor in our lungs. We excrete them in our hair. So we have lots of ways to ultimately get the toxins out of the body, but it starts at the cell, goes through the liver, and then into the organs of the body that ultimately get it out of the body completely.
And then, we hear toxins, but some of us know where some of them are coming from, or we think we do, but where do they come from? Well,
and so I mentioned earlier, we make toxic substances in our own body that we have to deal with. And as the example, wanted to illustrate, if our bodies aren't getting rid of our own toxins, that can really, really impact our health. But in the environment, basically everything that our body comes into contact with has the potential to be a toxin. So, when I first started to do this work and I would go to lectures all about toxic exposure in the environment, I'd get super overwhelmed and feel like, oh my goodness, I can't eat anything or, buy cosmetics or, I don't want to breathe the air. But so it can be overwhelming. But the message I want to share is it's a place where we have a lot of power as consumers to be able to decrease the toxic exposure that we're having. And part of it, the first step is just education, is really taking a look around your environment and understanding where you may be getting exposed to toxins. So water is the first place I look when I talk with my patients. We really need to filter our water. And there are a variety of methods. You can get something under the sink. You can have a filter in the refrigerator. They sell countertop units that are affordable and very effective. You can do whole house systems, but it's very important to filter your water because we know that our water contains heavy metals and chemicals that are still in the water even when the water's approved for municipal use. In other words, it's good enough for the guidelines, but not really good enough for human health. And you want to filter the water so that you're not, when you're trying to hydrate and be good about drinking the amount of water that you need, you don't want to be adding toxins to the body. So filtering water is really key in any family that's dealing with a chronic illness like ASD. Also, it's the food that we eat. There's a lot of talk, and most people in the autism community, in the biomedical autism community, know about genetically modified organisms and pesticides, and that you want to eat organic food whenever possible, and you want to avoid genetically modified foods because part of what is modified about the genetics of the food is to incorporate chemicals into it that kill pests, i.e. pesticides. So if you're eating GMO food and eating food that's grown with lots of pesticides sprayed directly on the fruit or vegetable, and then you eat those foods, you're eating those chemicals. And we have lots of data that shows that exposure to pesticides is associated with neurological damage, and associated with findings that we see in ASD. So your food is another huge exposure. Mother Nature gave us food as nourishment to heal our bodies, and there's a quote, it's Hippocrates, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. And I agree with that. But the food that most of us are eating in the United States is chemically laden unless we're knowledgeable and we make choices to try to get toward real food. So, and think about it, we eat all day long. We eat 3 meals a day and snacks every single day. So that's a huge level of exposure if there's a lot of chemicals and pesticides in your food. So filtered water and clean food is so important, and those are 2 big areas. And then, of course, things that we wash our bodies with, cosmetics, soaps, perfumes, creams, and there's, lots of manufacturers that try to avoid chemicals, and then there's other manufacturers that use them widely. And I always refer my patients to visit the Environmental Working Group, which is ewg.org. And it lists every consumer product you can think of, from laundry detergent to sunscreen, with the least toxic to the most toxic. So, a lot of us, and I know I do and did have brand loyalty. Well, I buy Tide because that's what my mother bought, or I use Dawn dish detergent because, that's what I always use, or I get whatever's on sale. You can then just pick one product. That's what I tell my families. Pick one product for every shopping trip that you're going to look it up, and you're going to get the least toxic product you can get. And then it's not overwhelming if you just do one item at a time. And then over about 6 to 9 months, maybe a year, you can really change your whole household so that the products that your family is exposed to are the least toxic possible. And then, avoid pesticides spraying all around the yard or inside the home, or if it has to be done, have everybody leave the home. Really stop and look around at what you use in your yard or planting or for pest control in your home. And again, try to make choices so that you're exposing your family to the least amount of toxins possible. And I think in any individual's home life, I think I hit on the top areas that we get exposure.
Absolutely. I know that even in everything you said makes 100% sense to me because this is the way we live. But, I live in Southern California, and we have ants, right, especially during the summer and different areas, like it rains and then it gets hot. And so it was really difficult because you have to use a natural bug spray of some sort. Usually it's an oil or something, right? And so I had to find a company that I could hire because I felt like at one point our house must have just been built on an anthill. I'm not even joking. I was just like, oh my gosh, like why? I hate ants. I hate them with a passion. and so, and I'm sure it could be worse, but when you wake up and there's ants everywhere, it's not what you want to wake up to.
No.
And it wasn't like there was food out or anything. They're looking for water or whatever they're looking for, right? And so, but I had no problem trying to get them killed because they need to go live somewhere else. And so I found a company that basically that specialize in that, and so they come and as you start to learn things, like there are other ways to kill bugs of that nature, or in just different ways to live your life versus always going for that chemical. And so we have them come. They come the last Thursday of the month. They're on our schedule, and they spray like it's basically an oil. It's a natural oil, and it kind of smells like rosemary from what I can smell of it. And I'm sure they told me what it was at one point, but I want to say it's rosemary of some sort.
Yes. Rosemary is amazing. It does so many things. I wouldn't be surprised.
And so it doesn't even smell bad, and it doesn't hurt the dog, and we don't have to leave our house for 30 minutes. And prior to my son getting autism, I remember living in a different place and having them come and spray, and I didn't think about the chemical use. I just thought didn't want bugs. And I remember them saying, oh, you can't be in the house for I want to say it was 2 or 3 hours after they spray.
Sure.
But then after that you can come in, and I don't know why. It never really hit me well, why should it only be 2 to 3 hours, and why would it be okay if I still came back?
And so how come I have to put plastic over everything, but it's okay to come in here and breathe?
Right, and so it's funny because until you have something that happens in your life where it really forces you to learn things, and I mean even our gardener, I refuse to allow them to spray the weeds and as much as he wants to, and there's some natural things he can kind of do. I don't know how well it really helps because it seems like he's constantly pulling weeds, but he gets really mad sometimes, and I can tell because he'll say, can I just do this? And I'm like, no, you cannot just do this. I cannot have that in my yard. I do not want that in my yard. If it means we have a little extra weeds, well, okay, so be it, We're going to live, and we're going to be much healthier.
Oh, yeah. We've given the backyard over to clover, and it's beautiful. It's soft. You can mow it, and, when a weed covers the backyard, you don't have to worry about other things. But yes, I mean, I last year I had a family that had a pest service come and spray the house because there were spiders getting in, and of course they needed to deal with it. But their little guy had been doing so well. He didn't have an ASD diagnosis. He had a PANS diagnosis, but, autoimmunity to the brain, so along the same lines, immune system driven. And he came home from school. It had been done in the morning. He went to bed that night, and when he woke up in the morning, his tics were full-blown, from the exposure. And I think a big part of that is because, everything, we always think that all of, our modern developments have all for the good, and we're not really encouraged to think about the downside. And so we have 150,000 novel chemicals, that means newly made chemicals that man-made, did not exist naturally in nature, over the last 20 years for industry in all the areas I talked about, food, cosmetics, fuel, and none of them are required to be tested for human health and safety. So, we're just taking it on the manufacturer's word that, this is okay. And if you read the labels closely, most of the cosmetics say, known carcinogens in here. And again, that's why being a knowledgeable consumer, there are manufacturers. Now, maybe it's $2 or $3 more, but there are manufacturers that are making good products. And like you were saying, there are so many different ways. And I think to my grandmother, she cleaned her entire house with vinegar and lemon, and she'd break out the bleach for tough jobs, with all the windows open. And I tell you, and then some essential oils. And so we've gone to that finally in my house, but it was a process. And we use Castile soap, which is a coconut oil-based soap. And they get the job done. But I think it's just, I won't call out any brands in particular, but, marketing, we are marketed to all the time as consumers because it works. And so I feel like my sink's not going to be clean enough unless I use, Super Duper X with, bleach in it when really I can just soak it in vinegar and lemon for an hour and it gets even cleaner and it's not toxic. So anyway, I encourage moms and dads to think about what they're getting exposed to for their own health in their home, because it's something you truly can control yourself.
Absolutely. I think you brought up a good point, too. I remember when I first left, it made me think of when I first left for college, and, I was living on my own, and the first time I went to the store to go buy the cleaners, I didn't even really look at any of them. I just bought I was raised by my grandmother, and so I just bought what my grandmother bought, and never thought about it. And, whatever, it's the same thing even with foods. It's like, okay, if this is the type of mayonnaise, brand you grew up with, that's the brand you're going to buy, or mustard, or whatever it is. It seems as though you just go to the store and that's your comfort zone. And, not until my son, was affected and was so sensitive did I learn another way. And I think that I think often the siblings of children with, sensitivities, or children with sensitivities that go on later and they can live on their own, I feel like their way now when they go to the store, right, they're not, I assume that they're going to do the same thing I did, except for they're going to buy the non-toxic version of stuff.
Oh, yeah, and our two older children are much older than Louisa. So Louisa's 11 now, and Emily's 18, and Zachary's 23. But their outlook and their perspective regarding toxicity, like we're talking about, is so different, than what mine was at their age, of course. But because of how our family has changed, so it's when they're living it, and I pulled all their food, and they got all new healthy food, But really, they're so knowledgeable and they're savvy, and so that makes me happy because I feel like their generation is much better educated than mine.
Absolutely, and I feel like if we can at least have a silver lining to why we go through what we go through, at least if we're learning to clean up the way we live, that's the silver lining, I guess, of in it, right? Yes. Because I know my son has taught me a lot, things I probably would have not known, So now, how do toxins affect the body?
Well, so I described the system that our body comes with, the detoxification system, that if it's working properly, you can get the toxins out of your body. But when it's not working properly, like we know in greater than 80% of individuals with ASD, they have impaired detoxification, those toxins stay in the cell and throughout the body tissues, and they disrupt normal function. So in autism, we already have impaired neurological function, impaired immune function, and impaired gut function, right? And those three systems are like a triangle, all interconnected. They all affect one another, and they're all part of detoxification because the immune system is involved in signaling. And, of course, if the brain has toxins in the brain, command central really starts to dysfunction. So when you're thinking about the three areas that are affected in autism, each one of them is impaired if it's loaded with toxins. And impaired means, what? It's the gut can't absorb nutrients properly and it can't get rid of its garbage properly, when the body has an increased toxic load. The immune system, and I focus so much on the immune system in really all the patients that I treat, because I treat a lot of ASD and I also treat a lot of PANS, as I mentioned earlier. The immune system has just gone haywire in both of those disorders. And part of that are these chemicals that I mentioned earlier that are man-made and not studied for how they affect the body. Well, studies are happening now, too few and not quickly enough, but thank goodness some are happening, that are demonstrating what these chemicals do to the body, and they're called endocrine disruptors. Your endocrine system is your hormone system, and they're called immune disruptors, and it's because these chemicals look similar to chemicals in nature, and when our body comes into contact with them, we put them on our skin, we absorb them, we eat them, we breathe them. Our immune system doesn't know what to make of them. And so, and sometimes they look so similar, especially plastics, look so similar to our own hormones chemically that our body views that plastic as a hormone, right? That's why that BPA is a big issue with estrogen, in the plastics in the bottles and everything. And so we are getting exposed to these toxins. They're staying in our body, and they are confusing our immune system, and they're confusing our hormone system. And, of course, our brain runs on our neurotransmitters, which are our brain hormones. So these chemical disruptors, when they're trapped in the body, really create further disease, right? And we're trying to get our kids, we're trying to get the neural inflammation down. We're trying to get the immune system calmed down and working properly. We're trying to reestablish a healthy gut with a healthy microbiome. If the body's laden with toxins, we're not going to be able to accomplish that. We have to clean the body out first, And so that's what happens when a child's not detoxifying properly. The toxic load impairs the ability of the body to heal.
That's a great, gosh, you break it down so easy, for lack of a better, term. You digest it very nicely.
I like that.
So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go on.
Yeah, so with detoxification and with autism spectrum, disorders, we talked about a little bit, but, let's really hit home. Why is it so important for these kiddos?
Well, it's very complicated because, and this, in terms of detoxification, I'd like to talk about one of the first studies done, which is almost 20 years ago now, and it was through the Autism Research Institute. And Bill Shaw, the director of Great Plains Laboratory, was the person who did the study, along with some other docs. These people are just amazing, just such trailblazers, that came ahead of all of us docs who are doing this now, and they're still at it. But anyway, they did, and this was when very few people understood that autism was a medical disorder with a lot of metabolic problems. And so basically, they took children who had an ASD diagnosis and their siblings who were neurotypical, because you can assume living in the same household and eating the same food that they have the same exposures in the environment. And we know that we are exposed to toxins on a daily basis, and we get rid of them if our body's working like it's supposed to. So they collected testing on both the children, on the child with autism and the neurotypical sibling, and it was a large group of children and siblings. And on all of them, they tested their hair, their urine, and their stool for excretion of heavy metals. And what they found was very ominous, because the children who were the neurotypical siblings had heavy metals coming out in their hair, in their stool, and in their urine, as you would expect. And the children with the autism diagnosis did not have excretion of heavy metals in their hair,
Wow.
in their urine, in their stool. What does that tell you? That doesn't say, you don't say, oh, great, the children with autism aren't getting exposed. You know they have the same exposure as their sibling. They aren't excreting it out of their body. So where is it going? Well, it's staying trapped in the cells and the tissues like I described, further disrupting their neurologic, immunological function in their body. And so, and what these doctors then did with that information was look at the systems in the body of detoxification. What do they require to work properly? And they require support of the methylation cycle, of the production of glutathione. That's our body's detoxifier. You need a gut that's absorbing nutrients and excreting toxins properly, and you need a gut that's having daily bowel movements. So, they stopped, they took a step back with this information, said, how can we help these children actually start to detoxify? And when they assisted them, and in many cases with chelation, HBOT helps with the detoxification process, all of the treatments that so many of us are familiar with in the biomedical treatment of autism, when they started to apply these treatments to the children and they started to detoxify, and of course they started to measure, they followed and measured their hair and urine and stool, and when children with an ASD diagnosis were able to detoxify, guess what? They started to improve clinically. They might regain eye contact or speech or motor planning, or a variety of improvements that all of us who do this know that we see in our children. And a huge piece of that is supporting the detoxification pathways. And that's the good news. We can really do a lot of interventions to help with detoxification. We've spent this time so far talking about all of the exposure that we get, and then how our body's supposed to work to get the toxins out. And then I think, the good news is that there are interventions that we can do to help our children support their detoxification and to get them cleaned out, and then to keep them, cleaned out. And, the Autism Research Institute collects lots of data, and they have data on over 28,000 families, moms and dads reporting, interventions and what they observed in their child. And they did data collection, I think it was over a 12-year period, on what the most beneficial interventions were. And gluten casein-free diet, the H-bot, and chelation were always in the top 3. And I think that the detoxification piece is so key. And, chelation is when you use a medication or an herb to go in and grab heavy metals specifically and help usher them out of the body. And I'm covering a lot of, we can backtrack on some of this if you'd like, because I'm covering a lot of information quickly. But, we have to support the organ systems, like I said, and that's the bowel function, the nutrition and all that, so that the body can detoxify. But for the trapped toxins, sometimes you need to go in and help the body get rid of those toxins. You want to have, methylation supported. That should be vitamins, fish oil, zinc, and magnesium. But sometimes you need to go in and actually kind of free up the toxins that are trapped in there, because a lot of times they're bound in our body. And chelation is effective and works well, and we have good data on that. But chelation can have a lot of side effects, and we know that we can control for those. But it's nice to be able to do methods that don't have as many side effects. And, of course, exercise and sweating is a big detox. Sauna is a big detox. Epsom salt baths you can do at home in the bathtub. That can provide a lot of relaxation and some gentle detox. But one of the tools that I've been using the last couple of years for detoxification support is the ion cleanse. And it's really one of my favorite tools. And it's funny because we talk so much about, the toxicity of our environment at this point in our very modern industrialized world. And I feel like the ion cleanse is this tool that is necessary to help your body deal with this man-made level of toxic exposure that Mother Nature never intended for our bodies to be able to cope with. And in reality, I think most of us can't cope with it. And so the ion cleanse, I'm so happy that I learned about it and gave it a chance, because I was a big skeptic before I did. And I've seen so many great results in my own family and with just so many of the families I take care of.
So let's back up a little bit, and then we'll get back to the ion cleanse, just because I want to give them a little bit more stepping blocks. I can't think right what I'm trying to say, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes. Well, we're building a foundation, yes.
There we go, yes. And so, how do you really approach supporting detoxification? So let's build that, kind of like you said, build that foundation for detoxification.
Yes. Thanks for going back to that. So when I talk about detoxification a lot because I find it so key in treatment. So a foundation for detoxification in my mind is based on 3 things. Sleep, and I can't say enough about sleep. And of course, as a mom with a child with autism, and I know this rings true for so many of us, I didn't sleep more than 3 to 4 hours for about 3 years, because sleep was such a difficult issue for us. And it's always nice to get sleep going for a child because it helps the whole family, right? Everybody needs sleep. But the reality is our body heals and detoxifies while we're sleeping. And we understand this more and more, that the brain needs to be in a deep sleep mode, in delta waves, not the dream sleep. It's the layer underneath the dream sleep, and that's our restorative sleep, for the toxins to drain through the lymphatics of the brain so that they can be processed out of the body. And if you're not getting good sleep at the proper level, your body's not doing that. And if you're doing that night after night, week after week, month after month, for some of our children, year after year, you're just getting a higher accumulation. So sleep is just so key, and there's so many things we can do to support sleep. So in terms of detoxification and just health in general, sleep is the first block in the foundation. And then second is nutrition. And I touched on this already, but it's eating real foods and trying to give your body the nutrients that it needs to do proper detoxification and to not add to the toxic load when you're giving nutrition. And then the third foundation is gut health. And really, everything does come back to the gut. It's another quote from 400 AD, she said, all disease originates in the gut. I mean, what a profound knowledge, right? And that, our gut health is dictated by our microbiome, right? All the friendly bacteria, and all the friendly organisms that live in our intestine. But the choices we make about what we eat and what we drink and what we expose ourselves to really dictates the health of our microbiome. So again, that's in our control. And so when I look at gut health, and of course, I do testing, stool testing, and other things to see what's happening in a child's intestines. So I can sometimes do pointed therapy. But in general, the recommendations are real food, a clean diet, digestive enzymes if there's any type of problems, on digested food in the stool, acid reflux, and then probiotics. I prefer probiotics in the form of fermented foods. But again, many of our children need capsule probiotics because they need a higher level of support. And then ensuring that there's daily bowel movements. I mean, it was funny because I know, there's no real conversation about autism that doesn't include poop, right? We were laughing earlier. And it's so true, though, because in order to detoxify, you have to have daily bowel movements, at least one, because that is where the majority of the toxins exit the body. And our kids who suffer with constipation, having bowel movements, once every 5 or 6 days, those toxins are just going through that leaky gut and recirculating through the body. And the gut's connected directly to the brain through the lymphatic, the immune highway, and so that is so toxic. And I mean, I have patients of all ages tell me when I resolved constipation like I described, like my brain fog went away, I was so clear, things were so much better. I mean, the neurologic improvements you see when you address gut health are profound. And again, if we're mobilizing toxins out of the body, we want them to get all the way out of the body, not just redistribute somewhere in the body. And the key to that is gut health, and especially having daily bowel movements. And I mentioned constipation, but loose stools and diarrhea, like so many of our kids have those kind of yeasty, unformed stools with partially digested food, 3 or 4 of them a day. That's a very leaky gut that's not going to be detoxifying properly either. So whatever the bowel issue is, you want to address it fully, treat it properly, and once you have a child sleeping well, eating well with great nutritional support, and having daily bowel movements, that is a foundation where then I'll add some other things to push detoxification.
And so, let's get into what are your favorite detoxification supports?
Well, it's interesting, and it can get, depends on the individual, of course, but I like basic, I described kind of the gut support, already, and then I like basic support. I mean, most of the people I take care of will be on a digestive enzyme if they have any type of digestive issues, probiotics, and then I like a B complex vitamin to support methylation, and I typically add zinc and magnesium to that. And then you want your essential fatty acids. Those are the fats that are crucial for cell function and methylation, and that's usually in the form of fish oil, some version that's appropriate for the individual. And then I always like to maximize or optimize, I should say, a vitamin D level, right, because vitamin D is crucial in cellular function, and part of that is detoxification. I like my patients' blood levels to be between 60 and 100 for vitamin D, and so I supplement whatever's necessary to maintain that blood level, and lots of hydration, and so then it really so that's the methylation part is supported. Now it depends on how aggressive I'm being. I don't want to say I don't use these tools, because I do. Sometimes I use glutathione, which is the molecule that is one of the products of our methylation cycle. And we know, again, children with ASD have decreased glutathione in the blood, and our glutathione is what our body naturally makes to help bind to toxins and help and get them into the detoxification pathway. So you've got to think about it. You've got extra toxins that you can't clear, and now you have enough of the glutathione that grabs them and takes them out to the curb to get picked up. You're going to accumulate even more toxins. So sometimes if you give somebody glutathione, that can help them start to take the trash out. And typically IV was the most well-absorbed form. It still is the most well-absorbed form, but there's manufacturers who've made some really nice forms that are oral or transdermal on the skin. So I'll use glutathione to help support detoxification. And then I already mentioned the ion cleanse, which I can talk about more, but that is really, once I have all the other things in place that I described, that's the tool I go to. And it's very, very easy, it's very, very safe, and it's very effective. So that's why it's the first tool I go for in my detoxification toolbox, because I have such great success with it, and I don't have to worry about, anybody having, adverse side effects or any safety issues with it.
So let's talk about the Ion Cleanse by AMD now. How does that work?
Okay, so, and I always like to tell this story before I talk about the Ion Cleanse, because again, and I'm a doc, and this is my passion professionally, and of course I'm a mom, and so Louisa had a lot of toxic exposure. We knew. I won't get into all the details, but she had a lot of mercury exposure, multiple flu vaccines, and I had mercury amalgams and, a variety of exposures. And Louisa, and like you said, you've learned so much from your child. I mean, she's just taught me. I've learned more from her than I could ever teach her. And so Louisa, always in our journey, has always moved forward, but slowly, by increments. And so there was never a huge, oh, wow, which I've had with certain, patients. And so it took us a lot of work to get to where we felt like Louisa was ready for chelation, and that's what we were planning to do. And we consulted with somebody who's very knowledgeable about chelation. We had everything set up, and Louisa is not typically a hard IV stick, and we could not gain IV access. And so we had to abandon it for that day. And my gut as a mom knew that there was a reason we couldn't make it happen that day, even though I really was excited and felt like it was such a crucial piece of her detoxification. And it just so happened that about 2 weeks before this failed chelation, I had learned about the ion cleanse by AMD at a conference. And I had heard some data presented from the TMR white papers, which I can talk about, which was using the ion cleanse with individuals with autism and seeing some really nice results, parent-observed results. And so I knew that was out there. And again, I was a skeptic. I thought, this just seems too good to be true or a little hokey. But I thought, what do I have to lose? And I know that it's safe. And so I got the ion cleanse, and I thought to myself, like all my family say to me, she's not even going to sit in it and put her feet in that thing. Are you crazy? But I got it. The first day Louisa did her foot cleanse, she did it for 15 minutes, and which she did happily, and she was eager to do it and sat for 15 minutes the whole time watching her iPad as happy as could be. And then about 2 hours later, she came to me and she said, "Mommy, can I have another foot bath?" Now, I find it very interesting. Our kids know what makes them feel better. And so, of course, and I was, I talk about this, you want to start low and slow, especially if somebody hasn't been detoxifying. We're not in a race. We're getting a process started, and you want to help them tolerate it as well as they can. So I said to her, "Oh, gee, honey, you can't today, but you can first thing tomorrow." And then, and so we used it. And over that first 6 weeks, I mean, we could see her OCD, revved up a little bit, just a few tics, that she'd had kind of resurfaced very briefly for a week or two and then went away. And she started to have just dramatic improvements. And we changed nothing else in her regimen at that time, nothing. And her language improved dramatically. She had become verbal, but her pragmatic language, still isn't normal. But she was able to correct her pronouns. And basically what I'm describing, what we saw a big change in was her apraxia, because that has to do with the speech, the problems with the speech, but also with the motor planning. And suddenly my child who, at 9 years old still, I opened up the minivan for, she just buzzed up the stairs. I grabbed her book bag or I had a reminder 10 times. We all know how it goes. Suddenly she was grabbing her stuff, hopping out of the minivan, closing the electronic door herself, opening up the gate and holding it for me to walk through. It was like, and I remember my husband saying to me, "Are you kidding me? Is that the foot bath?" And I was like, yes, apparently. So, and you have to change the array plate that goes in the water I change about every 2 months. And so this was the first time I was changing the array plate. I was in the kitchen, and it's just a wing nut and a bolt. It's very simple to do. But as I was doing it, it rolled off my island and dropped on the floor, and the bolt went one place and the nut went another place. And I was like, "Oh, darn it," or something like that. And Louisa ran in the kitchen to see what was wrong and looked and said, "Mommy, Mommy." And then she saw the array in pieces, and she burst into tears. And Louisa is not a crier. I mean, that was very uncharacteristic for her. She burst into tears, and she said, "Mommy, that's my foot bath. I need it." And I didn't really need to hear anything other than that. She really knew what was helping her. We had observed all of these remarkable improvements over that period of time, and she herself told me that she needed it. So I started to use it more in clinic, recommending it to patients, and I recommended it to patients that weren't responding to treatment as I had hoped or anticipated, or like other patients were, kind of my tough nuts. And sure enough, they started to improve. They could tolerate treatment better. It was very, very exciting. And so I really became interested in trying to find out how does it work, which is what you asked me, because it does work. We see these clinical responses in patients, and nothing works 100% of the time for 100% of people, of course. We all know that. But I see the ion cleanse help individuals the majority of the time. I mean, 90% of the time. And it's so safe that I feel like it's an intervention that I'm very comfortable doing, because I can combine it with anything else I'm doing with the patient. I can put the ion cleanse by AMD in their treatment plan, and it usually helps them do better on their treatment. But we're all working very hard to try to understand what is the ion cleanse doing. So I can tell you, well, let me just describe what it is for people who don't know. It's a unit that generates an electric current, so you plug it into the wall, and it's connected to a stainless steel array that goes into a basin of water, and it puts a very controlled low level of electric current in there. And then the individual puts their feet into the basin, and their body experiences that current. And that process of putting in electric current through water is called electrolysis. A lot of us have heard that word. And when you do that, it affects the water molecule, which most of us remember is H2O, 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. Hydrogen has a positive charge, oxygen has a negative charge. And when you put electricity through the water molecule, it breaks the molecule, so you get positive charge and negative charge. And something that has a positive or negative charge is called an ion, and that's the name, ion cleanse. And that's how our body works. Our body truly works through electric current in our cells. We have ions, positive and negatively charged, and they're like the light switch. You walk in a room and you turn on the light switch and the light comes on overhead. Well, we all know there's a lot of complicated wiring in between that, right, to make that light and the light bulb itself. That's how our cells are. What the light switch are ions, positive and negative ions, moving around the cell, and that's like the switch, and then the cell does its job. When your cells are in a diseased state, the signals or the light switches can be broken. And when you put your feet into the foot cleanse, and that frequency, that electric current goes through the body, and it's designed to be a current that is bioharmonic. That means it's the same current that are in our cells. It kind of corrects the signal, and then your cells start to be able to do their job better. So that's one aspect, and we're trying to develop research to better illustrate that, of the cell membrane signaling. And I'll tell you, the area in medicine that studies this microcurrent a lot is homeopathy, and practitioners who use the Asira or the Zyto machine. That's all based on electric frequencies, which again is how the human body works. But we're very, energy is hard to put your hands on, right? We like things that are tangible, that we can touch and we can see and we can measure. So we like to really focus on the biochemistry of the cell. But every biochemical reaction in the body has an electric frequency that goes with it. So you can affect positive change, beneficial change in biochemistry through changing the electric current in the body. That's acupuncture. So anyway, it's amazing, and we've all the different modalities that I mentioned. There's professionals using the machine and doing research or designing research so that we can understand and define that better, so other doctors can learn about it and use the tool. The other thing that the ion cleanse does, and we know this, is it puts the body into a relaxation response, your rest and digest response, which is the response that the body needs to be in to heal. And unfortunately, most of our children with an ASD diagnosis, and most of us parents, we're in a fight or flight mode, right? We're in that stress mode. And that is not a mode that your body can do true healing and get true restorative sleep in. So we want to get our kiddos into that relaxation response. And you can watch it when they're in when they have their feet in the basin. After 10 or 15 minutes, you can just see their entire body relax. And we're collecting nice data using heart math monitoring of changes in the heart rate, because when you relax, your heart rate goes down, to show what's happening to individuals who are using the ion cleanse, that they're getting into that relaxation response. Parasympathetic mode is the medical term, or that rest and digest. And then the third mechanism is actually taking toxins out of the body into the water through the bottom of the feet. So when I talk about this and do a presentation, I always include a slide that shows that we have 250,000 sweat glands on the bottom of our feet. And we have a whole other set of glands on the bottom of our feet called eccrine glands, and their job is to excrete toxins out of the body. So that's my line. Feet are made to excrete. And the ion cleanse, right? And of course, I learned that in medical school, but forgot it, and it was only when I was doing research trying to figure out why is this thing so amazing. It really, and of course, that's because humans used to run around, without shoes and touching the dirt or the grass or the outdoors, and that's where we would absorb a lot of minerals and get rid of a lot of garbage, So, but in any event, our feet still are capable of doing that, and when you have your feet in warm water, the pores open, so it's even more effective, and then heavy metals have a positive charge. So when the water is generating ions that have a negative charge, it's like a magnet, negative and opposite attract, right? So positive and negative ions are drawn to each other. And so positively charged toxins will exit through the body, and then the water, changes the polarity. So sometimes there's more positive ions, sometimes they're more negative. That's what the unit controls. And then negatively charged toxins will come out. And a lot of toxins have a negative charge, especially the man-made chemicals. So, and we, again, have data collected, which is going to be available shortly, and this was done years ago with this unit, but documenting that there is an increase in heavy metals in the water itself after an individual does a foot bath.
Now, how long, before, if I don't want to run out of time, how long do they typically do this? Is it once a week? Is it multiple times? Is it different for every child?
And again, there's been data collection twice, and it was over a 4-month period in children with autism, and an ATEC score was used to monitor their response, and there was a 55% reduction overall in the ATEC score. I mean, people's ATEC scores went in half. I mean, just
so people
really
people that don't know what ATEC, I know what ATEC is, but can you it's the Autism Treatment Evaluation Checkoff List is what she's talking about.
You got it, exactly. And that was developed, and it's a tool that was developed by ARI again, right? It's free. You can download it from the ARI website, which is autism.com. And it's a validated research tool, and it's a questionnaire that parents or caretakers fill out in the 3 areas that define autism: speech and communication, social interaction, and neurologic stimulation. And it gives a score. And really what it's designed for, it's a treatment checklist. So you would fill it out, and it would give you a score, and then say you'd start the gluten casein-free diet. You'd do that for 3 months. And then you'd do the ATEC again, and if that score went down, then that would give you evidence that the diet had helped, because the higher the score, the more severe the autism symptoms. The lower the score, the less severe the autism symptoms. And so it's not a diagnostic tool, but it does correlate with severities of symptoms. So generally over 100 is severe symptoms, 70 to 100 moderately severe, 30 to 70 moderate, 10 to 30 mild, and under 10 probably neurotypical. We all have a little something here or there. And so you got to think about somebody who was severe with a score of 100 going down to a score of 45 in 4 months. And that's what we're seeing. And to answer your question, the frequency, the best results was when the ion cleanse was done 3 days in a row for 15 to 30 minutes, and then 1 day of rest, and then 3 days in a row and 1 day of rest, and just repeat that. So basically you're doing it 6 out of 7 days a week.
So it's 3 days in a row. Let's say that again so people understand. So it's 3 days in a row for how long?
Well, you start with 15 minutes, and you increase by 5 minutes a week to a goal of 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the age of the child and their tolerability, So most of
it's not an increase of 5 minutes each next day. It's that week. So you're you're 15 minutes for 3 days, and then you take a day off, and then you do 3 days again at 15 minutes, take a day off, and then you would increase it to 20 minutes that following week, doing it 3 days in a row, taking a day off. Got it. Okay, just make sure they understood.
That's as fast as I like anybody to increase, but some of my patients with a very high toxic load or just other issues that make it harder for them to detoxify, or they have more symptoms when they start to detoxify, I may increase it by, a minute a week, or I may keep them at 15 minutes for a month or two and then increase them. You can vary it individually, but the general recommendation is to do it the way I described, starting with 15 minutes, increase by 5 minutes once a week to a goal of between 30 and 45. And it's not a hard and fast rule, but kind of for me, if the child's, less than 8, I usually have them do about 30 minutes. And if they're older than 8, I usually work them up to 45 minutes. But again, a lot of other thoughts.
Is there any symptoms? Is there any symptoms somebody might see if they're let's say they increased it from 15 minutes and they do 20? Is there any negative symptoms they might see?
Yeah, and
is it positive or?
Yep, sometimes I call those negative positives. You can see that something's happening. Kind of like if you treat a child with a real yeasty gut. For the first 3 or 4 days they actually look a little more symptomatic, but you know that you're on the right track because something's happening. And then when the yeast is better, they're much better. So even when you see negative, and I usually call it an uptick, I don't see it all the time, but I see it frequently, and I just educate parents to be on the lookout. If you see a little more irritability, a little more stimming, some sleeplessness, just know that it's because you're starting to move the garbage around, and just give them Epsom salt baths to help them relax, use some essential oils, keep the stress low. And it's usually temporary. And so
how long is it temporary?
Usually 1 to 3 weeks. And again, if even, some kids, they don't skip a beat and they start to look better right away. Some kids, it's a little more intense and we slow it down. But in general, I'd say 1 to 3 weeks. Usually at about 2 weeks, you'll kind of see the peak of, the uptick, and then it starts to go down. And that's typically when I start to see really notable improvements.
So people that are maybe doing hyperbaric or they're doing infrared sauna, can they do this at the same time, or if they,
It can't, absolutely, yes is the answer. However, detoxification costs the body a lot of energy, and our kids don't have a lot of energy, right? So you can't overdo it, and so usually if I'm doing the ion cleanse, I don't do the HBOT and the infrared with it at the beginning because I just don't want to push them too hard. And then once they're used to it, then I may add in one at a time and couple them together. It's actually really nice with HBOT. But again, it's a new treatment. I'd like to only do one thing at a time for a child, at the beginning.
If for a child that's really, really sensitive, would you recommend it maybe starting at once a week for 10 to 15 minutes, increasing?
And thank you for asking that. I wouldn't, because really what I found, and again, it would be something you would decide on an individual basis with your practitioner when they're familiar with using the Ion Cleanse by MD, but I'd like to keep the frequency. So if I have a child that's sensitive, I'd be more inclined to do them 10 minutes, 3 days on, 1 day rest, and not do the bath as long, but keep up the frequency. Now, that being said, there are some patients I've had to do 2 days on, 1 day rest. But there's something, and as we're seeing the data that's coming, there's something that's important about doing it frequently. And I think it's really just, proposed mechanisms why, but we know that from the data collection that patients had a much better response when they did it 3 days on, 1 day rest than 2 days on, 1 day rest. So
is there ever a time where they don't need it as often? Or is this like an ongoing thing forever?
No. So our kids, I think about using it at the beginning to get rid of, total body retained toxicity and some of our kids, they've been carrying it around for a very long time. Typically, I see it take about 9 to 12 months and certain individuals I'll do monitoring with, the toxic metabolites in the urine or hair or stool. And sometimes you can just tell by how much the child improves in their clinical function. But it typically takes about 9 to 12 months to get rid of that retained toxic burden. And then I have my patients flip-flop it. So then they go to a 1 day on, 3 days rest, 1 day on, 3 days rest, and that's maintenance. And I encourage parents to just get on that right away themselves because, we're all living on this planet with all these exposures, and, we all need some help.
And so that's something for life that basically it's just a maintenance thing of keeping a healthy lifestyle of 1 day on, 3 day rest after you get to wherever that individual may be getting, typically between 9 to 12 months. Am I hearing that accurately?
Exactly. That's just how I would say it. And I gave my parents who were going to be 70 this year a unit for Christmas. Because a lot of the chronic brain issues that elders have, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, we know are related to toxicity. And, and there's, reports cases where Alzheimer's symptoms have reversed with the use of the Ion Cleanse by AMD. So, toxicity is bad for all of us, and anything we can do to decrease our toxic load in our body is worth doing.
And the whole family can use it. Now, I have been so fascinated. Everything you said, I cannot believe we're almost at an hour here. It went by fast. My goodness. It really does. I know that there was a TMR, which is Thinking Mom's Revolution.
Yes.
If people don't know what that means, so if we say TMR, paper that, what does it tell us about Ion Cleanse by AMD?
Well, and they had two papers. And I touched on this a little bit, and again, it was using that ATEC score, and it was a group of about 30 children. All of them had an ASD diagnosis, and most of them had were on some type of biomed. They were on a clean diet and generally well supported. And they did, and this was they did an ATEC score at the beginning every 30 days, and then it ended at 120 days. So that's why I said 4 months, and that was a regimen of a minimum of 15 minutes, anywhere between 15 and 30 for the treatment itself, and it was 2 days on, 1 day rest, 2 days on, 1 day rest. And overall, there was a 45% reduction in the ATEC score, which was amazing. I mean,
wow.
That's a short period of time to have that much improvement. But they did a second paper with a whole entire group of kids, new children, same criteria, except they did 3 days on and 1 day rest. And that's where they saw the overall improvement of 55% reduction. But what was most impressive in that group was that the children aged 12 years old to 18 years old had a 65% reduction in their ATEC score.
Wow.
And that is very encouraging for families with children who are older. This idea that there's a window for healing, I think, is erroneous. And again, the older children have a higher toxic load. And when you start to help them relieve that and also help them with the other effects of getting into that relaxation response and helping with the electric, signaling in their body, they respond. And so that was very, very exciting. And so those are the two papers from the Thinking Mom's Revolution.
Is there any, for lack of better terms, I know a study is different than if we say a survey, right? But is there any type of survey out there that talks about children that after they've done this for 9 to 12 months and they've had their ATEC scores, dramatically reduced, are they still doing well on the maintenance plan of potentially 1 day on, 3 days off?
Yeah, there has been no formal data collection of that, but I know just from working with so many patients and working with AMD with, supporting some of the questions that come in, that children maintain their gains. They maintain their gains, and one of our other practitioners whose son was nonverbal. It's her story to tell, but he was nonverbal, and he within 4 months of using the Ion Cleanse by AMD, he started to get his speech back. She started at age 7. Now he's 9, and he's completely recovered. And yes, and so he does 45 minutes once a week. That she just kind of trusted her clinical gut, and that's kind of his sweet spot. And he's maintained all of his gains, mainstreamed. Went to a rock concert 3 weeks ago, and just loved all the music.
Wow! Oh, I love stories like that. I know.
It's inspiring.
I love anything to do with hope, clearly, and I love it when there's hope with a plan. And again, for those listening, everything doesn't always work for everybody. We're not trying to say this is like an end-all, be-all. These are just great options to look into and consider for your family. These are the results that you're seeing in your practice, and the papers that are being done with Thinking Mom's Revolution, but because I know some people might get a little bit leery, they're saying because not everything works for everybody. I mean, my son's 15, and I've tried. Actually, he'll be 15 this week. But yeah, I have tried so many different things, and I'll read something somebody does, or I'll talk to a family, and they've had amazing results, and then I try it, and it's like I didn't notice anything, But that doesn't mean that it wouldn't work later on. It doesn't mean that I won't go back to that. And so I want the families listening, for at least with my journey that I've had, I have been exposed to lots and lots of different treatments, and for the most part, I've bought almost every. I own a hyperbaric, I own an infrared, I own an Ion Cleanse, for AMD by AMD, and but is my son recovered? No, he's not. But is he progressing? Yes, he is. And I just have to keep, and I've taken breaks from stuff. Like I've taken breaks, from hyperbaric. I've taken breaks from ion cleanse. If we went to, like, for example, we did stem cell, I've taken breaks from different things. And that doesn't mean that I don't go back to that. And it doesn't mean that maybe we'll have even further gains, the next time we try it. So I don't want people to be discouraged if they say, oh, well, Sally tried that and her kid didn't get better. I think we have this kind of weird sense of what quote unquote gets better looks like, right? And, because often we hear, oh, they don't have the diagnosis on them. But what if got better look like, all of a sudden spoke, so much more, or all of a sudden I could have that relationship with my child. And, maybe they slept better through the night. And to me, we have to do all those little steps in order to get whatever that end goal. For me, my end goal for my son clearly would be to be healthy and live on his own and have a life where I didn't have to worry about him. I want him to be a tax-paying citizen, And so I know some people might be listening, and it's like, trust me, I get a lot of emails if you use the word recovered. Here's my thing. I don't care if you call it purple, green, yellow, orange, right? It does not matter to me. I just want our kids to be healthy. I want them to feel good. I want them to have all of the opportunities that we've had and then some. And so I think we get too stuck on that word, right, recovery, where they say, oh, it's not possible. And here's the other thing when I think of it's not possible. We heard people that had strokes way back in the day. I remember growing up, and they would say, oh, they had a stroke. They lost their ability to speak. They lost their ability to move, their mobility of their arms. It's over for them. Game over. And we know that's not true today. And so if, an 80-year-old can regain speech and an 80-year-old can move their body again after severe strokes, why would we ever believe a child, and I don't care at what age, 5, 10, 22, 52, can't figure out a way? Because we are still learning about this thing we're calling autism. We're still learning different, techniques. Would you agree?
I would agree wholeheartedly. And the interesting thing, about the example that you used with stroke is that's absolutely true that people can regain that, and they need to do rehabilitation, right? So if the expectation 20 years ago was you had a stroke and we're going to give you 3 weeks of physical therapy, and wherever you get to is the farthest you can go, and then we're going to take away the therapy, well, then that person did plateau there, right?
Yeah.
And then when you view the brain with a lens of neuroplasticity, right? That's the big word in neuroscience now, that the brain is very adept at healing, and you then do a year of physical therapy, that person gets back to normal function, which actually happened to my sister in her late 30s with a stroke. She's 100% recovered. And the reason I'm talking about it like this, because I loved your example, is you do have to maintain an expectation and hope and keep doing the therapies and keep making progress. And I say this to families a lot, and it's how I think of our journey. So you start at one point, right? And you can go in one direction, let's say all the way to the left, right? Or you can go all the way to the right. It doesn't matter, if you're going in the wrong direction, you're going to end up at a totally different point. But if you're going in the right direction, it doesn't matter how fast you get there, because, we are learning, and this is a challenging, disorder to support people with. And I appreciate what you're saying about, the word recovered or managed recovery. We just want our kids to be as healthy and functional as possible, and we want to be the same. And so when people are on a road to recovery, I think it's okay to take breaks. And just like you were describing, there's treatments we did that at the time weren't helpful, but we revisited them, as you mentioned, after we had cleared up an infection that we didn't know was there, or after we had done, we got sleep addressed. And then when we went back to that intervention, we did get nice gains that we hadn't gotten before. And I'll tell you something that's funny about the ion cleanse just quickly is, and I'm not a salesperson, people can contact them if they're interested, but they offer a 60-day money-back guarantee. And I'm mentioning that because you can imagine the time I might spend in a visit trying to educate a family that I really want them to do this treatment, and I have to spend some time explaining why. And the 60-day money-back guarantee gives people a chance to try it, knowing that they can get 100% of their money back if they don't have a positive result. And I think that 60 days is a sufficient amount of time to see if your child is going to respond, right? And I had one mom, really just a great mom, 3 kiddos with issues and all getting treated, and she sent it back on day 59, and then she called AMD back like a week and a half later and was like, they were doing so great, I thought I didn't need it, and then we went without it for a week and a half, and I need it back, And so, which I thought was really good. And I can tell you story after story about patients and even kiddos using it. First time one of my little guy's feet was in it, he looked at his mom and said, "I can feel my brain getting cleaned out through my feet." And of course he didn't know anything about the technology. So, but I just wanted to share, echo what you said, that treatments are worth a try, and you never know how you're going to respond, and timing is important. And I think with the opportunity to try it, and if it doesn't work for your child, to send it back, it's kind of, it's a very low risk. You're just talking about water and a little bit of salt and, plugging it in the wall. So that makes it easy.
And I know there's a Facebook group. I looked it up right now. It's called Ion Cleanse by AMD. And AMD stands for a major difference, if you guys are wondering. But it's Ion Cleanse by AMD for ASD, right?
Yes.
So, and they can go to that group, ask to join. I'm sure there's tons and tons of moms on there that will love to be able to help you answer more questions. On top of the I know a lot of the people that work for the company are on there as well answering questions. We have one, as I said, and because we spend so much money, just like so many families listening.
Oh, sure.
I think people think that because of what I do for my job, I just get everything sent for free to me because we give so many things for free. And I'm just going to tell you guys, that does not happen for me. Right?
No.
So, Autism Hope Alliance gives so much away, through so many different things we do. But I have to figure out ways to buy mine still, right?
Yes.
And so, and I can't qualify for the scholarships because we're the ones giving them. So they have a rental program that I joined. And it was, and please don't, I want to tell you what I paid, and if it's a little different, I'm sure it can't be that much of a difference. Again, I don't work for them, but it was $450 from what I remember, and I could be wrong, but I think it was $450 as the initial fee, and then I know they charge my credit card every month, and I want to say it's like $39 or something like that. And then eventually I'm going to own this thing, and I think I'm pretty close to darn owning it at this point, which meant I did pay a little bit more than what if I would have done it, up front. But for me, to have that, to have the initial $450, that was also a little bit of a sting to do because I'm paying so much for, everything else. But then it was like, okay, once I got through that, then all I really had to do was worry about $40 or so, and then buy the plates, and buy the minutes after. And again, it wasn't a ton. It really, I don't notice it. Put it that way. I don't notice it. And I think that we go to Target often, and you can buy. I buy so much crap, I swear. Like I'll be there and I'm like, how did I just spend that much money? I don't even feel like I got anything other than paper towels. Like, how did that happen? And so I think that, when you look at it in those terms, and again, for me, I didn't have, I did have it in my bank account, but I needed it for other stuff, right? Because it's April. But I didn't have that extra, I don't know the exact dollar it is. I know it's about $2,000 and some change, or $2,200, or I think it's $2,000 and change. I think it's $19.95 or something. And,
it is $19.95.
Yeah, and so you basically, I didn't, for those people that say, okay, I don't want to pay any extra other than that, then buy it up front. But if you are like me, and I think there's a lot of people out there like me, the rental program, and yes, I ended up paying a little bit more, but gosh, in order for me not to feel that at all, I'm happy to do that. And, and so that way my son still got to do a treatment that, and that's the thing, guys, the rental program, if you want to buy it, that money goes towards that, which I think is great. And again, I don't work for them. I don't make $1 if you buy it. It's basically, they're one of the sponsors of the summit as well. And again, I'm not even talking about it because of that, because we don't do that. This is just something that I believe in, that I've seen so much. My son hasn't had the wow experiences yet from it, but I'm not going to give up on that. And yet I promise you that I read and I listen to all these families talk, and I'll be at a conference and they just swear by it. And so I have to believe where there's smoke, there's fire, and so again, guys, just an option if you guys do it or don't do it. I don't want it to feel like they're feeling like they're being sold. It's just when you get excited about something, you want to share it. And so that's what I feel like we've done here today. I can't believe we've actually gone over, but that's okay. What's so great that we can do that. And what?
Well, we had a lot of ground to cover.
We did. So what? For those families out there that are feeling hopeless and are feeling like they don't know what to do right now. Like they just feel sad and scared, and especially if you're new in the diagnosis or you've been a veteran and you've tried everything. What is the last message to wrap it up for today? What's the message you want to leave them with to give them some inspiration?
That we are all in it together, and if you're feeling that way, reach out to other people who have similar experience. TACA is, I love all the parent groups, and TACA is one of my favorites because it's families helping families, and you can go to their website, you can reach out to people there, connect with other people that are going through the same thing you are, because we all have this shared experience, and when we're down and sad and out of energy, somebody else can bolster us up, and when we're feeling better, we can do that for somebody else. And the brain does have an incredible ability to heal, and I think that it's one step at a time, one day at a time, and I think focusing on the love you have for your child and the experience that they're having, be with them. I've learned this with Louisa through our journey. As sick as she's ever been, and the kind of wall that was between us in terms of communication because of her brain inflammation in no way affected her personhood and her experience of her own life, And even though our journey's been different and there's been times it's been a struggle because of her health, she's 100% present, intact, and our relationship is. And I really fall back on that because, it's more than you bargain for when you get this diagnosis, but the relationships and closeness that we have with our children are, in my mind, a blessing. So I get a lot of hope from that, just from being close with Louisa, and then doing the basic things that I know to do for her and keeping an open mind and just kind of taking it one day at a time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you're doing for the community, and I think you just said that so beautifully. And, for all those parents listening, again, there's just options, and we just can't give up hope. We got to keep on keeping on and looking for that thing that might be the thing that might help. If it's not going to hurt, I always advocate to try. And, we've come so far compared to where we were even 13 years ago when I joined the community and with my son, and we continue to learn. We continue to find things that potentially can help. And because we don't know enough about autism, we really don't. We know a lot, but not enough. And
correct.
I feel like we just have to keep looking into new options to try for our kiddos. And it, again, doesn't matter that age. So, guys, thank you for listening. And thank you so much, Dr. Fritz, for all that you do and for not giving up on our community and for just really putting your voice out there and making a difference.
Well, thank you, Kristen. It's a pleasure and it's a privilege. And thank you for everything you're doing and for making this possible.
Oh, thank you. And thanks, everyone, for listening.